When I discovered my brother Marcus had embezzled $2.5 million from our family business, I felt a twisted satisfaction. The same parents who abandoned me during my cancer treatment were now desperately calling, begging for help. They had chosen their golden boy over their dying daughter, cutting off all financial support when I needed them most. But karma has a funny way of evening the score, and watching their perfect son destroy everything they built felt like justice served cold. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. If this hook already has you hooked, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible family drama stories. Trust me, you will not believe how this unfolds. The betrayal goes so much deeper than you think. My name is Aurelia Blackwood, and 3 years ago, I thought I understood my family dynamics. I was the ambitious daughter who chose art over business, while my younger brother Marcus was the heir apparent to Blackwood Construction, our family's multi-million-dollar empire. Dad always made it clear that Marcus was destined for greatness, inheriting not just the company, but also the respect and financial backing that came with being the chosen one. Everything changed when I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer at 28. The treatments were aggressive and expensive, even with insurance. I had to quit my teaching job, and my savings evaporated within months. When I approached my parents for help, their response shattered what remained of my naive faith in family loyalty. "Aurelia, we have already invested so much in your education and your failed art career," my mother said coldly over dinner at their mansion. "Marcus needs our full financial support right now as he expands the business. We cannot afford to drain resources on medical bills that might not even work." My father nodded in agreement, cutting his steak methodically. "The doctors give you a 60% survival rate. Those are not odds we can invest in when Marcus has guaranteed returns. He is launching the new commercial division, and every dollar counts." I stared at them in disbelief. "I am your daughter. I am dying, and you are talking about return on investment." "Do not be dramatic," my mother snapped. "You chose to live independently. Independence means handling your own problems. Marcus has always been responsible and family-oriented. He deserves our support." That night, I walked out of their house and never returned. I sold everything I owned, moved into a tiny apartment, and fought cancer alone while working part-time jobs between chemotherapy sessions. My parents attended Marcus's business dinners and vacationed in Europe while I lost my hair and 30 pounds, surviving on ramen and sheer stubbornness. Meanwhile, Marcus was living his best life. Social media showed him in designer suits, driving luxury cars, and dating Instagram models. The business was supposedly thriving under his leadership, and our parents never missed an opportunity to brag about their brilliant son to anyone who would listen. He never once reached out during my treatment, not even a text message asking how I was doing. I went into remission after 18 months of hell, but the damage to our family relationships felt permanent. I rebuilt my life slowly, finding work as a freelance graphic designer and eventually starting my own small marketing agency. I kept my distance from the Blackwood family drama, focusing on my health and my future. Then 2 weeks ago, everything exploded in the most spectacular way possible. It started with a phone call from a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice asked, "Is this Aurelia Blackwood, daughter of Robert Blackwood of Blackwood Construction?" "Yes, who is this?" "This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about your family's business. There have been some serious allegations made against your brother Marcus regarding missing funds." My heart pounded as she explained that Marcus had been systematically embezzling money from the company for over 2 years. The initial investigations suggested the missing amount was somewhere around $2.5 million, but they were still uncovering the full scope of his theft. "We understand there was a family conflict and you have been estranged from the business," Detective Martinez continued. "However, we need to verify some financial records and your parents suggested you might have information that could help our investigation." I almost laughed at the irony. The same parents who had written me off as a bad investment were now hoping I could help them recover from their golden child's betrayal. "Detective Martinez, I have had no involvement with Blackwood Construction for 3 years. My parents made it very clear that I was not family when it came to business matters." But even as I said it, my mind was racing. Marcus had always been their favorite, but he had also always been careless with money. In high school, he had crashed 3 cars and maxed out credit cards that our parents quietly paid off. In college, he had been caught cheating on exams and buying essays, but our father had made donations to ensure he graduated without consequences. The signs had always been there, but our parents had been too blinded by their favoritism to see them. Now their precious investment had cost them everything, and they were about to learn exactly how expensive unconditional love could be. After hanging up with Detective Martinez, I sat in my small but cozy apartment, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. The family that had abandoned me was finally facing consequences for their choices. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl who worshipped her big brother, felt genuinely sad about how far Marcus had fallen. That sadness did not last long, though, because my phone rang again 20 minutes later. "Aurelia." "Oh, thank God you answered." My mother's voice was shaking, barely recognizable from the cold, controlled tone I remembered. "We need to talk. Can you come over? Please?" I had not heard from either parent in over 2 years, not even a birthday card or congratulations text when my business started turning a profit. Now they needed something, and suddenly I was worth their time. "I am busy, Mother. What do you need?" "It is about Marcus. There are police officers here and they are saying terrible things. We need your help." The desperation in her voice was almost satisfying. Almost. "What kind of terrible things?" "They are saying he stole money from the company. Millions of dollars. But that is impossible. Marcus would never do that to us. He loves this family." I closed my eyes, remembering all the times they had said Marcus loved the family while I was apparently just a selfish burden. "What exactly do you need from me? You are always good with numbers and details. Maybe you can look at the financial records and find the real problem. The police have to be wrong." It was almost funny how quickly their tune had changed. 3 years ago, I was not worth investing in. Now I was their potential savior. "I will think about it," I said, and hung up. But I did not need to think about it. I was absolutely going to help them, just not in the way they expected. The next morning, I drove to the police station and asked to speak with Detective Martinez. She was a sharp woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Miss Blackwood, I appreciate you coming in. I know this must be difficult for your family." "Detective, I want to be completely transparent with you. My family cut me off 3 years ago when I was battling cancer. They chose to financially support my brother instead of helping with my medical bills. I have not spoken to them since, and I have no loyalty to protect anyone who committed crimes." Her eyebrows raised slightly. "That is unusually direct. I believe in honesty. Now what can you tell me about what Marcus did?" Detective Martinez opened a thick file folder. "Your brother had access to multiple company accounts as the operations manager. Over the past 2 years, he created fake vendor accounts and approved payments to companies that did not exist. The money was then transferred to personal accounts he controlled." She showed me bank statements and forged documents with Marcus's signature. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. He also inflated material costs on legitimate projects and pocketed the difference. She continued. When clients paid for premium materials, he would substitute cheaper alternatives and keep the extra money. "How much total?" "We have confirmed 2.4 million so far, but we expect the final number to be higher." He was very systematic about it. I studied the paperwork, recognizing Marcus's handwriting on several documents. There was no doubt he had done this deliberately and repeatedly. "There is something else," Detective Martinez said carefully. "Your parents have been trying to cover this up. They knew about the missing money 6 months ago but hoped they could handle it privately. They have been liquidating personal assets, trying to replace what he stole." My blood ran cold. "They knew?" "Your father discovered discrepancies during a routine audit in August. Instead of calling police, they confronted Marcus privately. He promised to pay it back, so they gave him time, but he kept stealing even after being caught." The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. Not only had they chosen Marcus over me when I was dying, but they had also continued protecting him even after discovering he was a criminal. They would have let him destroy the entire business rather than hold him accountable. What happened to change their minds about involving police? A major client noticed that their project materials did not match what they paid for. They threatened to sue and demanded an audit. Your parents could not hide it anymore. I spent 2 hours reviewing evidence with Detective Martinez, and she was right. The case against Marcus was airtight. He had been stealing systematically and had gotten increasingly bold about it. The fake vendor payments alone showed clear intent to defraud. When I left the police station, I had a decision to make. I could walk away and let my family deal with the consequences of their choices, or I could get involved and potentially help recover some of the stolen money. But as I sat in my car outside the station, I realized there was a third option. I could get involved in a way that ensured justice was truly served, and that my parents finally understood the cost of their favoritism. I drove straight to my parents' house for the first time in 3 years. The mansion looked exactly the same, but my father looked like he had aged a decade. His hair was completely gray and his face was drawn with stress. My mother answered the door with red eyes and trembling hands. "Aurelia, you came. I knew you would help us." "Where is Marcus?" "He is at the police station with his lawyer," my father said, joining us in the foyer. "They arrested him this morning." I looked around the house where I had grown up, noting the expensive artwork and furniture that represented the success of Blackwood construction. Success that had been built partially on stolen money. "I spoke with Detective Martinez," I said calmly. "She showed me the evidence. Marcus is guilty. My mother's face crumpled. "But surely there is some explanation. Maybe he was trying to help the business in some way we do not understand." "Mom, he created fake companies and wrote himself checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. There is no innocent explanation for that." My father sank into his leather armchair, looking defeated. "We just do not understand how this happened. We gave him everything. We trusted him with the business." "You gave him everything," I corrected. "You made it very clear that I was not part of this family's success story." The silence that followed was deafening. "Aurelia, we know we made mistakes," my mother said quietly, "but we need to focus on saving the business now. Marcus is still our son, and this family needs to stick together." I stared at her in amazement. Even now, even with overwhelming evidence of Marcus's crimes, she was asking me to help protect him. "You want me to help you save the business that I was never allowed to be part of, to protect the brother who never once contacted me during my cancer treatment, and to support the family that abandoned me when I needed them most." My father looked up hopefully. "You were always the smart one, Aurelia. If anyone can find a way through this, it is you." That was when I smiled and delivered the words I had been waiting 3 years to say. "You are absolutely right. I am going to help you through this, but not in the way you think." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, but not the kind my parents expected. While they huddled with expensive lawyers trying to minimize Marcus's legal exposure, I was building a coalition of people who had been hurt by my family's choices and Marcus's crimes. My first ally was completely unexpected. Linda Morrison had worked as the office manager at Blackwood Construction for 15 years before being laid off 6 months earlier. My parents claimed the layoffs were due to restructuring, but now I suspected they were actually trying to cut expenses to cover Marcus's theft. I found Linda working at a small accounting firm for half her previous salary. When I explained why I wanted to meet, her expression shifted from confusion to anger. "I knew something was wrong," she said over coffee at a diner downtown. "The numbers never added up in those final months. I kept asking Marcus about discrepancies in vendor payments, and he would get defensive and tell me it was above my pay grade." Linda had kept copies of financial documents that she thought might be important someday. As we spread them across her kitchen table that evening, the pattern of Marcus's theft became even clearer. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of payments to something called Premium Material Solutions. "I tried to contact this vendor multiple times because their invoices did not match our usual format. The phone number was disconnected, and the address led to an empty lot." "Did you tell my parents?" "I told your father, and he said Marcus was handling it personally. He told me to stop asking questions about vendor relationships because it was confidential business strategy." Linda had been fired the week after that conversation. "They sacrificed me to protect Marcus," she said bitterly. 15 years of loyal service, and they threw me away the moment I got too close to the truth. My second ally was David Reyes, a project foreman who had worked for Blackwood Construction for 8 years. David had been questioning material quality on several recent projects, noticing that what was being delivered did not match what clients had paid for. "Your brother told me the suppliers had changed their product lines and the new materials were equivalent quality," David explained when I met him at a construction site. "But I have been in this business for 20 years, and I know the difference between premium and standard grade materials. Clients were paying for the best and getting average." David had started documenting the material substitutions because he was worried about safety and liability issues. He had photographs, supplier invoices, and detailed notes about conversations with Marcus about the discrepancies. "I was planning to quit," he admitted. "I cannot put my name on substandard work, especially when clients think they are getting top quality. Your brother kept promising to fix it, but nothing changed." When I showed David the evidence Detective Martinez had shared with me, he immediately understood how Marcus's scheme had worked. He was charging clients premium prices, ordering standard materials, and pocketing the difference. That is fraud, and it puts everyone at risk if there are structural problems down the line. My third ally was the most surprising of all. Jessica Holloway was one of Marcus's ex-girlfriends, someone I had met briefly at family events before my estrangement. She reached out to me through social media after hearing about Marcus's arrest. "I need to tell someone about the things I saw," she said when we met for lunch. "I dated Marcus for 8 months last year, and I always wondered how he could afford such an expensive lifestyle on his salary." Too. Jessica had watched Marcus spend money recklessly. $1,000 dinners, designer clothing, luxury vacations, expensive jewelry for her. When she asked about his finances, he claimed he was getting performance bonuses and had made good investments. "He bought a $50,000 watch last spring," she said, showing me photos on her phone. When I asked if that was smart financial planning, he laughed and said his parents would always bail him out if he got in trouble. But the most damning information Jessica had was about Marcus's attitude toward the family business and toward me. "He used to complain about your parents constantly," she said. "He called your father weak and your mother controlling. He said the business was old-fashioned and that he could run it better." "What did he say about me?" Jessica looked uncomfortable. "He said you were jealous of his success and that you had tried to manipulate your parents during your illness. He claimed you were faking how sick you were to get attention and money." The cruelty of that lie took my breath away. Marcus had not only stolen from the family business, but had also actively poisoned any chance of reconciliation between me and our parents by spreading false stories about my motives during the worst period of my life. There is something else, Jessica continued. Marcus showed me financial documents from the business several times. He said he was learning to take over, but I think he was actually planning his thefts. He would point out vulnerabilities in the system and talk about how easy it would be to move money around without anyone noticing. Armed with testimony from Linda, David, and Jessica, I had a clear picture of Marcus's crimes and the systemic problems that had enabled them. But I also had something more valuable. I had allies who were as committed to justice as I was. We met regularly over the following week, coordinating our stories and gathering additional evidence. Linda had financial documents that proved the timeline of the theft. David had proof that clients were being defrauded through material substitutions. Jessica had testimony about Marcus's planning and his attitude toward the family. Together, we were building a case that would not only ensure Marcus faced full consequences for his crimes, but would also expose how my parents' favoritism and willful blindness had enabled the entire scheme. The most satisfying part was watching my parents scramble to understand why their damage control efforts were failing. They had hired expensive lawyers and public relations consultants to minimize the scandal. But everywhere they turned, new evidence kept surfacing. How did the media find out about the material substitutions? I heard my father asking someone on the phone when I stopped by the house to pick up some childhood belongings I had left behind. Who is giving reporters access to our internal financial documents? My mother wondered aloud. They had no idea that their own former employees were actively working to ensure the full truth came out. They had spent so many years believing that loyalty could be bought and that problems could be covered up with enough money and influence. Now they were discovering that loyalty had to be earned and that some problems were too big to hide. But just as I was feeling confident about our progress, I received a phone call that changed everything. Linda's voice was shaking when she called me late one evening. "Aurelia, we have a problem. Jessica just called me. She is backing out." My heart sank. "What do you mean, backing out?" "Your parents offered her money to keep quiet about what Marcus told her. A lot of money. She is going to take it." I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, but this time it was different. This time I was prepared for it. "How much money?" She would not say, but she sounded scared. She kept saying she could not afford to get involved in a legal battle with your family. I hung up and stared at my apartment wall, thinking about my next move. My parents were willing to pay to bury the truth, and they had found Jessica's price. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that everyone was motivated by money, just like Marcus had been. They did not understand that some people were motivated by justice, and some betrayals created allies that could not be bought. I picked up my phone and made a call to someone I had been saving for exactly this moment. "Detective Martinez, this is Aurelia Blackwood. I think it is time we discuss the full scope of my family's cover-up attempts." Detective Martinez met me at a coffee shop the next morning, and I could see the frustration in her eyes before she even sat down. "Your parents are playing hardball," she said without preamble. "They hired Morrison Pierce and Associates, one of the most expensive white-collar defense firms in the state, and they are not just defending Marcus anymore. They are going after anyone who might testify against him." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Jessica Holloway contacted our office yesterday and recanted her previous statements. She now claims she misunderstood conversations with your brother and that she has no evidence of criminal activity." I had expected this, but hearing it confirmed still stung. "They bought her off." "That is what it looks like, but we cannot prove it. She is refusing to cooperate further and has hired her own attorney, also paid for by your family, according to our sources." Detective Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed me a legal document. "But that is not the worst part. Your parents are claiming that you are orchestrating a malicious prosecution because of your personal vendetta against the family. They are suggesting that you have been coaching witnesses to lie." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even with overwhelming evidence of Marcus's guilt, my parents were trying to paint me as the villain in this story. They are saying I made this up, that I somehow fabricated bank records and forged documents. They are not claiming the theft did not happen. They are claiming that you are exaggerating the scope and manipulating witnesses to make Marcus look worse than he actually is. I stared at the legal papers, feeling a familiar rage building in my chest. 3 years ago, they had abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. Now they were actively trying to destroy my credibility to protect their criminal son. Detective, you have seen the evidence. You know Marcus is guilty. Absolutely, but your parents have enough money and legal firepower to make this very complicated. They are going to argue that Marcus made some poor judgment calls, but that the family has already taken steps to make clients whole. They want to frame this as a civil matter rather than criminal fraud. Over the next hour, Detective Martinez explained how my parents' strategy was unfolding. They had quietly reached out to the clients who had been defrauded through material substitutions and offered to cover any additional costs or repairs needed. They were presenting this as Marcus learning from mistakes rather than acknowledging deliberate fraud. They are also claiming that the missing money was loans Marcus took from the business with the intention of paying it back. They have produced some backdated loan agreements that their lawyers created. Backdated agreements, that is fraud in itself. Yes, but proving the documents are backdated is more complicated than you might think. Their lawyers are very good at creating plausible paperwork. I left that meeting feeling defeated for the first time since this whole situation began. My parents had resources I could not match, and they were using every advantage to protect Marcus while simultaneously destroying my reputation. But the worst blow came that afternoon when Linda called me with devastating news. Aurelia, I am so sorry. I have to withdraw from helping you. What? Why? Your father came to my current job today. He spoke with my boss privately, and now I am being written up for poor performance. My boss suggested that I might be happier working elsewhere. My heart sank. They are threatening your job. Not directly, but yes. Your father made it clear that Blackwood Construction has influence with several major contractors in town, including the company I work for now. If I continue cooperating with the investigation, I will be blacklisted from the construction industry. Linda had 2 kids and a mortgage. She could not afford to lose another job, especially not with the threat of being unable to find work anywhere in her field. I understand, I said, even though it felt like another betrayal. You have to protect your family. I am keeping copies of all the documents I gave you, she said quietly. If you find another way to get them into evidence without my testimony, you have my permission to use them. By evening, I had lost 2 of my 3 key allies. David was still with me, but he was wavering. His supervisor had started asking questions about his cooperation with police, and he was worried about retaliation. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by financial documents and testimony notes, feeling more alone than I had since my cancer diagnosis. My parents had managed to isolate me once again, using their wealth and influence to silence anyone who might speak against their precious son. But as I stared at the evidence scattered across my coffee table, I realized something important. Jessica and Linda might have been intimidated into silence, but the documents they had provided were still valid. The bank records, the fake vendor invoices, the material substitution photos. None of that disappeared just because they were no longer willing to testify. I called Detective Martinez and left a voicemail. I know my family thinks they have won by silencing witnesses, but the evidence speaks for itself. Let me know what else you need from me. The next morning brought another surprise. David called me before I had even finished my coffee. Aurelia, I need to tell you something. Your brother contacted me yesterday. Marcus, I thought he was not supposed to have contact with witnesses. His lawyer reached out through official channels, but the message was from Marcus. He wants to meet with me privately. He says he has a proposition that could benefit both of us. My blood ran cold. David, do not meet with him. This is witness tampering. I know, but I want you to hear what he is offering. He claims he can get me a promotion to site supervisor if I testify that the material substitutions were my idea, that I was cutting corners to save the company money, and that he only found out about it recently. The audacity took my breath away. Marcus was not just trying to buy David's silence. He was trying to frame him for the crimes. David, you realize he is asking you to confess to fraud, right? He wants you to take the blame for his crimes. I know it sounds crazy, but he is also offering to pay my legal fees if there are any complications. And honestly, Aurelia, I cannot afford to fight your family in court. They have resources I do not have. I could hear the defeat in David's voice, and I understood it completely. My parents had systematically eliminated every person who might testify against Marcus using a combination of financial incentives, career threats, and legal intimidation. What are you going to do? I am meeting with him tomorrow. I want to hear the full offer before I decide anything. After hanging up, I realized that my parents' strategy was more sophisticated than I had given them credit for. They were not just silencing witnesses, they were actively rewriting the narrative to make Marcus look like a victim of employee misconduct rather than the mastermind of a systematic theft. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They assumed that I would give up once my allies abandoned me, just like I had given up and walked away during my cancer treatment. They did not realize that this time was different. This time, I had something I did not have 3 years ago, absolutely nothing left to lose. I was sitting in my car outside David's construction site the next morning, watching him meet with Marcus, and wondering if I had lost my last ally when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Is this Aurelia Blackwood? Yes, who is this? My name is Thomas Walsh. I am a forensic accountant and I have been following your family's case in the media. I think we need to talk. Thomas explained that he had worked with Detective Martinez on several major fraud cases and that he had been unofficially reviewing the Blackwood construction evidence at her request. What I found goes far beyond what your brother stole, he said. There are systematic irregularities going back almost 5 years. I think Marcus has been embezzling money since the day your parents put him in charge of operations. We met at his office that afternoon, and Thomas walked me through financial analysis that made my head spin. Using specialized software, he had identified patterns in the Blackwood construction books that suggested Marcus had been stealing steadily and increasingly boldly over years. The fake vendor scheme that got him caught was actually his most recent method, Thomas explained, pointing to charts and graphs on his computer screen. Before that, he was manipulating payroll-inflating expense reports and skimming cash payments from clients. How much total are we talking about? Based on my preliminary analysis, I estimate Marcus has stolen closer to $4 million over 5 years, not the $2.5 million currently documented. The number was staggering, but Thomas had more devastating news. Your parents had to have known something was wrong years ago. The financial irregularities are too obvious and too consistent for competent business owners to miss completely. He showed me audit reports that my parents had commissioned from their regular accounting firm. The reports contained footnotes and recommendations that clearly flagged concerns about cash flow discrepancies and vendor payment irregularities. These audit reports go back 3 years, Thomas said. Your parents received professional recommendations to investigate these exact issues, but they never followed up. Because they trusted Marcus, or because they were willfully blind to his crimes. Either way, their negligence enabled him to steal millions more than he could have if they had exercised proper oversight. Thomas had something else that changed everything. He had found connections between Marcus's crimes and the timing of my parents' decision to cut me off financially. Look at this timeline, he said, pulling up a detailed spreadsheet. Your cancer diagnosis was in March 3 years ago. Marcus's thefts increased dramatically starting that same month. Your parents told you they could not afford to help with medical bills in May. But Marcus bought his first luxury car in June. The pattern was clear and heartbreaking. Marcus had used my medical crisis as cover for escalating his theft. While I was fighting for my life, he was stealing the money that could have paid for my treatment, and our parents were either too blind or too protective to notice. There is more, Thomas continued. I found evidence that your parents took out a second mortgage on their house 18 months ago. They told the bank it was for business expansion, but the money went straight into company accounts that Marcus controlled. They mortgaged their house to cover his theft. Without realizing it, yes. Marcus was draining money so fast that they had to inject personal funds to keep the business operational. But instead of investigating why they needed the money, they just kept feeding him cash. Thomas handed me a thick folder of documents. This analysis proves that your brother is responsible for far more damage than anyone has acknowledged, and that your parents' negligence enabled millions in additional losses. What can we do with this information? We can use it to pursue civil recovery in addition to the criminal charges. Your parents might avoid criminal liability for the cover-up, but they cannot escape the fact that their negligence allowed massive fraud to continue for years. But Thomas had saved the most important information for last. Aurelia, there is something else you need to know. I found records showing that your parents did have the money to help with your medical bills. They were not actually struggling financially when they turned you away. They were choosing to protect their cash reserves to cover Marcus's unknown theft. The betrayal felt fresh and devastating even 3 years later. My parents had not just chosen Marcus over me. They had lied about their reasons for doing so. How can you prove that? Bank records, investment statements, property valuations. At the time, they claimed they could not afford your medical expenses. Your family had liquid assets worth over $3 million. I stared at the financial documents, seeing my family's betrayal quantified in black and white numbers. They could have easily afforded to help me without impacting their lifestyle or business operations. But they had chosen to hoard resources to unknowingly subsidize Marcus's crimes instead. Thomas, I want to hire you officially. I want a complete forensic analysis of everything Marcus stole and everything my parents failed to prevent. That is going to be expensive. My rate is $300 per hour, and this could take weeks. I thought about my small but growing business, my careful savings, and my modest lifestyle. Then I thought about Marcus's luxury cars and expensive watches purchased with money that could have saved me from months of terror about medical bankruptcy. Do it. Send me a contract. Over the next week, Thomas worked around the clock to build an airtight case. He brought in additional forensic specialists and worked directly with Detective Martinez to expand the criminal investigation. Meanwhile, David had taken Marcus's deal and agreed to testify that the material substitutions were his independent decision. Jessica had signed a non-disclosure agreement and refused to discuss Marcus at all. Linda was avoiding my calls entirely. But Thomas had something better than witness testimony. He had mathematical proof that could not be intimidated, bribed, or manipulated. Numbers do not lie, he told me as we reviewed his final report. Marcus stole $4.2 million over 5 years. Your parents received at least 6 separate professional warnings about financial irregularities that they ignored, and they had the resources to help you during your illness, but chose not to. The evidence was overwhelming, but Thomas had one more surprise for me. I also found something interesting about Marcus's current financial situation. He is not as broke as everyone thinks. Thomas showed me records indicating that Marcus had hidden substantial assets in offshore accounts and cryptocurrency investments. Even after being arrested, he had access to hundreds of thousands of dollars that he had stolen and concealed. He could pay back a significant portion of what he stole, but he is pretending to be indigent to avoid restitution requirements. Can we prove the hidden assets? Absolutely. And here is the best part. Hiding assets while under investigation for financial crimes is a separate federal offense. Marcus just committed additional felonies while trying to avoid consequences for his original crimes. I smiled for the first time in weeks. My parents thought they had won by silencing witnesses and hiring expensive lawyers. They had no idea that their golden child had been digging his hole deeper every day since his arrest. Thomas, how soon can we get this information to Detective Martinez? I am meeting with her and the district attorney tomorrow morning. By tomorrow afternoon, Marcus will be facing additional charges, and your parents will be facing civil liability for enabling his crimes through negligent oversight. As I drove home that evening, I felt something I had not experienced in 3 years: hope. Not just hope for justice, but hope that my parents would finally understand the true cost of their favoritism and willful blindness. They had sacrificed their relationship with me to protect Marcus, mortgaged their home, to unknowingly fund his crimes, and destroyed their business reputation to avoid holding him accountable. Now they were about to learn that some mistakes are too expensive to fix, and some betrayals create consequences that money cannot buy away. The final confrontation happened in a federal courtroom on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the confident golden child who had once been the pride of the Blackwood family. Thomas's forensic analysis had led to additional federal charges for money laundering, tax evasion, and concealment of assets. The original embezzlement case had grown into a complex financial crimes prosecution that carried a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I watched from the gallery as Detective Martinez testified about the scope of the investigation. She presented evidence of systematic theft spanning 5 years, hidden offshore accounts containing $800,000 in stolen funds, and Marcus's attempts to frame his co-workers for his crimes. The defendant did not simply steal money, she told the court. He created an elaborate criminal enterprise designed to maximize his theft while minimizing detection. When caught, he attempted to destroy evidence and manipulate witnesses to avoid responsibility. My parents sat in the front row looking like they had aged decades in the past few months. The mortgage on their house had been foreclosed when they could not keep up payments after losing their business income. Blackwood Construction had filed for bankruptcy, unable to survive the scandal and the massive restitution requirements. But the most satisfying moment came when the prosecutor read Thomas's financial analysis into the record. Your Honor, forensic accounting shows that the defendant's parents had full knowledge of financial irregularities dating back 3 years. They received multiple professional recommendations to investigate discrepancies, but failed to act. Their negligent oversight enabled the defendant to steal an additional $2.7 million after red flags were identified. The judge looked directly at my parents. While criminal negligence charges are not being pursued in this case, the court notes that the enabling behavior described here contributed significantly to the scope of financial damage. During the victim impact portion of the hearing, I had the opportunity to address the court directly. I stood at the podium and looked at Marcus for the first time since his arrest. Your Honor, Marcus Blackwood did not just steal money from a business. He stole my family, my security, and my faith in the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. When I was diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago, my parents told me they could not afford to help with medical bills because they needed to support Marcus. I now know they had millions of dollars available, but chose to hoard resources that were unknowingly subsidizing his crimes. I saw my mother start crying, but I continued without pause. Marcus used my medical crisis as cover to escalate his theft. While I was losing my hair to chemotherapy and selling my belongings to pay for treatment, he was buying luxury cars with stolen money. When I reached out for help from my family, they abandoned me to protect someone who was destroying everything they had built. The courtroom was completely silent except for my mother's quiet sobbing. I survived cancer, rebuilt my life, and started my own business, despite having no family support. But Marcus, who was given every advantage and endless second chances, chose to repay that investment by committing felony theft. The contrast speaks for itself about character resilience and the true meaning of family loyalty. I looked directly at my parents for the final part of my statement. I do not expect this conviction to repair our relationship or undo the damage that has been done. But I hope it serves as a reminder that actions have consequences, that favoritism enables destruction, and that real love requires accountability, not blind protection. The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 12 years. He was also ordered to pay full restitution of $4.2 million, which would be collected from his hidden assets and any future earnings. As the bailiffs led Marcus away in handcuffs, he looked back at our parents with an expression I had never seen before: genuine fear and regret. For the first time in his life, charm and manipulation had not saved him from consequences. After the sentencing, my parents approached me in the courthouse hallway. My father looked broken, and my mother could barely speak through her tears. "Aurelia, we know we made terrible mistakes," my father said quietly. "We should have supported you during your illness, and we should have held Marcus accountable years ago." "We lost everything," my mother whispered. "The business, the house, our reputation, and we lost you, which hurts more than anything else." I studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse for the first time in my adult life. But I also saw people who were sorry about consequences, not necessarily sorry about choices. "I appreciate you acknowledging your mistakes," I said carefully. "But acknowledgement is not the same as making amends, and I am not sure you understand the difference yet." "What can we do?" my father asked desperately. "How can we fix this?" "You cannot fix it. Some betrayals are permanent, and some damage cannot be undone. You chose Marcus over me when I was dying, and you continued choosing him even after you knew he was a criminal. Those choices have consequences that will last the rest of our lives." I paused, thinking about the family I had built for myself over the past 3 years. Friends who had supported me through cancer treatment, business partners who respected my abilities, and a community of people who valued me for who I am rather than who they wanted me to be. I have learned that family is not about blood relationships or shared last names. Family is about people who show up when you need them, who tell you the truth, even when it is difficult, and who love you enough to hold you accountable for your actions. My mother reached out like she wanted to hug me, but I stepped back gently. "I forgive you both because carrying anger is not healthy for me. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation, and it does not mean pretending this never happened." I walked away from them in that courthouse hallway feeling lighter than I had in years. The quest for justice was complete, but more importantly, I had proven to myself that I could survive anything, even the complete betrayal of the people who were supposed to love me most. 6 months later, my marketing agency had grown to 15 employees, and I had moved into a beautiful office space downtown. Thomas Walsh had become not just a business associate, but a close friend who understood the value of truth and integrity. Detective Martinez and I stayed in touch, and she often referred other fraud victims to my company for crisis communication services. I built a life surrounded by people who earned their place in it through loyalty, honesty, and mutual respect. I learned that chosen family can be stronger than blood family, and that sometimes the greatest gift difficult people give you is showing you exactly who they really are. My parents eventually moved to a small apartment across town and took jobs working for other people's businesses. We exchange Christmas cards now, polite and distant, but the deep relationship we once had will never be restored. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Marcus will be eligible for parole when he is 45 years old. By then, I will be successful, surrounded by people who love me, and completely free from the toxic dynamics that once defined my family relationships. The little girl who used to worship her big brother and desperately sought her parents' approval is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her worth, demands respect, and refuses to accept anything less than genuine love and loyalty. That transformation was painful, but it was also the greatest gift I ever gave myself. Sometimes, justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing. It is about freeing yourself to become the person you are always meant to be. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that ultimately led to something better in your life? I know my story is extreme, but I have learned that many families struggle with favoritism and enabling toxic behavior. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Did karma eventually catch up with the people who wronged you? Your stories of overcoming family drama give me so much hope and remind me that we are all stronger than our worst experiences. If this resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, revenge, and finding your chosen family. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people who claim to love them. Thank you for listening to my journey from family outcast to independent success story. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and surrounding yourself with people who see your true value.